A large van, its dark exterior devoid of windows or any identifying marks, screeched to a halt beside him. Before Richard could react, the side doors slid open with a metallic groan, revealing a yawning darkness inside. His heart leapt into his throat, his breath catching in his chest. He froze, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs felt like they were rooted to the ground. The next few moments were a blur. Hands, rough and unyielding, grabbed him, yanking him off his feet and into the van. A coarse bag was thrown over his head, the fabric scratching against his face and cutting off his vision. He gasped, the air suddenly thick and suffocating, but before he could scream, his hands and feet were bound with something tight and unrelenting. Panic surged through him, hot and overwhelming, as he thrashed against his restraints. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over as he tried to cry out, but his voice was muffled by the strip of duct tape slapped across his mouth. In that moment, Richard felt something he had never experienced before: complete and utter helplessness. The van's engine roared to life, the vehicle lurching forward as it sped away from the trailer park. The darkness inside the van seemed to press in on him, suffocating and endless. He could hear the low murmur of voices, men's voices, but the words were indistinct, drowned out by the pounding of his own heartbeat in his ears. Where were they taking him? What did they want? Questions raced through his mind, but there were no answers, only fear. As the van hurtled down the empty roads, Richard's thoughts turned to his family. His mom, asleep in their trailer, unaware that her son was gone. His little sister, who always looked up to him. Would he ever see them again? The weight of that thought was unbearable, and he squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the terror. But the darkness was everywhere, inside and out, and Richard knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same. Minutes had turned into hours. Hours had turned into... Richard had no idea. Time had become a shapeless, meaningless thing, stretching and collapsing in on itself like a bad dream. He had no way of knowing how long he'd been in the van, whether it had been a day, 2 days, or more. The only constants were the hum of the engine, the occasional jolt of the tires over uneven roads, and the oppressive darkness that surrounded him. The bag over his head never came off, and the bindings on his wrists and ankles never loosened. His mouth was still sealed with duct tape, though his cries had long since dried up, replaced by a numb, hollow feeling in his chest. He had taken several naps, if you could even call them that. They were more like desperate escapes, moments where his body and mind simply gave out from exhaustion. Sleep was the only relief he had, a temporary reprieve from the fear and uncertainty that gnawed at him whenever he was awake. But even in sleep, there was no peace. His dreams were fragmented and chaotic, filled with shadowy figures and half-remembered faces. He would wake up disoriented, his heart racing, only to realize that his nightmare was still very much real. One thing was certain: he was still in the van. The same van that had snatched him from the quiet streets of North Star Trailer Park. The same van that had become his prison. He could feel every bump in the road, every turn the vehicle made, but they told him nothing. He had no idea where he was going, or why this was happening to him. The questions circled in his mind like vultures, picking away at what little hope he had left. What's going on? He would ask himself over and over again. But there were no answers, only the suffocating silence of the van and the occasional murmur of voices from the front. He couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was cold, detached. It sent a chill down his spine. Eventually, Richard stopped asking questions. It was easier that way. Easier to just close his eyes and let the darkness take him again. Being awake wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to stop whatever was coming. So he forced himself to sleep, even when his body didn't want to. Even